You are accused of murder. What happens now? A lot of clients and a lot of potential clients call me up and try to understand from me what is going to happen in their case when they are accused of an offense. Sometimes I do have complainants as well who want to ask and understand about what happens when they accuse somebody of committing an offense. Now, of course, murder is the most sensational one, so we'll take that as an example. And this kinda actually happened with somebody that I represented a couple of months ago. So this is kind of a case study slash example of a sensational nature. Coming back to the point, you are accused of murder. What's going to happen now? First and foremost, in all likelihood, the police will try to apprehend you. Obviously, they'll try to put you under arrest because it is a cognizable, which means that the police have the power to investigate the offense. It's a cognizable offense and it's a non-bailable offense. Non-bailable means that the police does not have a right to release you on bail. You will be produced before a magistrate. You will have to move an application for bail, and only then, if the court deems it fit, will you be released on bail. So if it's a cognizable offense, it's a non-bailable offense. So the police will try to hunt you down as quickly as possible, also so that they can inquire from you. They can ask you things which will help the police in figuring out whether you are actually the perpetrator or not. Assuming that you are arrested, the police will then endeavor to collect the medical evidence, the eyewitness testimony, and every other such evidence which will aid the prosecution in getting a conviction against you. Included in that, and a big part of it, is collecting eyewitness testimony. The police collect eyewitness testimony under section 161 of the Criminal Procedure Code. Now, it's very important to know it even as a layman, because you need to understand that any testimony given by a witness to the police is not admissible as evidence by itself. The person who has given that statement to the police must also come to court at a later stage at trial and testify. And that statement given to the police is not going to help the prosecution in any sort of way. It is there only so that the police can compile its case and then submit it in a court of law. It is used, however, by defense counsels to contradict the person who has come to court and given his testimony. So if I go as a witness and I say that I saw you commit the murder, and I give my statement under section 161 to the 161 of the Criminal Procedure Code to the police, when the state does call me to the testimonial stand to stand and give my testimony, I will give my version again, and hopefully in the same line of thought that I gave to the police. Now, however, the defense counsel can and ideally should use my earlier statement given to the police under section 161 of the Criminal Procedure Code and try to contradict me. So the defense counsel will ask, Mr. Agarwal, you said that on that night you saw the person stab the victim from the front. Now your testimony is that he did not stab him from the front, he stabbed him from the side. Which was correct? The earlier version or this version? To which I will most likely say that the version that I gave in the court was the correct version, and that the police officer did not actually write down my statement properly, which is then used by the defense to show lacunae in the investigation process. And that will also be used against the investigating officer and confronted. That the defense counsel will confront this statement to the investigating officer and say that the allegation, now that we are saying, we are putting an allegation on you, Mr. Investigating Officer, that you did not correctly investigate into the matter and that you wrote the 161 statement of the witness yourself. You did not actually bother to take down the statement verbatim of the prosecution witness. Apart from that, there will also be, if it's a murder case, there will be a lot of medical evidence. If all of this investigation process which the police does earlier is compiled into what is called a charge sheet and is submitted before the court. Now, if it's a murder case, there is a very good likelihood that the judge will not really need to think much about it and will issue summons to the accused person, that is you, who is already in custody. Mind you, the police will have a very, very strong incentive to file the charge sheet, this particular charge sheet, within 90 days of having arrested you. Otherwise, you have a mandatory right to be released on bail. This is called the law of statutory bail, where if a person has been accused of an offense and he has been arrested by the police, within 60 days of his arrest in minor offenses and within 90 days of his arrest in certain more grave cases, the person, if the charge sheet is not filed, the person has a right to be released on bail as a matter of right. So ideally, in most cases, the police will file that charge sheet within 90 days because it's a murder, it's a grave offense. And once the charge sheet is filed, summons are issued to you. You are, of course, in police custody already, so you're produced from the jail before the judge. And then the judge reads out to you the charge. There will be arguments on charge. The judge will read out the charges against you. You will, in all likelihood, plead not guilty. And the matter will then proceed to trial, where all of these witnesses who have already been investigated, their statements taken down by the police, they will now be called one by one by the state and actually to give their eyewitness testimony as to what exactly happened. After that, the statement of the accused under section 313 is recorded. It's very, very crucial because every single thing which has come in evidence, which the prosecution witnesses have said against the accused person, now all of that testimony will be put to the accused. And the way it happens is there will be a question answer format. So the question that will be asked to the accused person is, it has come in evidence against you that Mr. Amish Agarwal has deposed that he saw you stab the victim from the front, from the side, whatever I said in my main testimony. So Mr. Agarwal has deposed that he saw you stabbing the victim straight up ahead. To which, what do you have? And then the question is, what do you have to say to that? To which, ideally, again, the accused person should reply, it is incorrect, and it is wrong, and it is denied, and it is incorrect. And then after that, if the defense evidence, if you want to show any witnesses who will come and testify, maybe there is a plea of alibi, that you were actually somewhere else when purportedly the crime was committed, or that you want to show that you had no motive to commit the crime, or that there is some other motive to falsely implicate you in the case. In those kind of situations, you will want to get a defense witness to come and testify to all those facts in your favor. Now after that, the arguments happen and the matter concludes. The judge will then decide whether you will be convicted or not. Another very crucial thing that is very, very important in criminal cases especially is the question of whether there is direct evidence or whether there is circumstantial evidence. So now, for example, in this particular case till now, what I have discussed is Amish Agarwal saw you stabbing the victim in the chest or in the stomach or whatever it is. For example, if the victim, his body is lying on the street, there is a knife, and on the knife there is fingerprint of you, and which are traced back to you, and then there is perhaps a phone message which says that you which shows that you messaged the victim, I will kill you. And then there is perhaps also some of the victim's blood which is found in your car or on your clothes or maybe on your shoes. So those are what is called circumstantial evidence because there is no direct evidence. There is no first person eyewitness account as to what transpired. In that situation, the onus is much more heavier on the prosecution because now it is circumstantial evidence. There is one judgment of the Supreme Court which is parroted over again and again, which is the Sharad Birdi Chand Sharda versus State of Maharashtra principles of circumstantial evidence. There it should be a chain, the chain should be complete, it should be such that it leads to no other possibility but to the guilt of the accused person. So all of those factors are seriously considered by the courts, and at that point of time, if it is found that there is enough circumstantial evidence to convict you and that there is no other possibility, no other hypothesis which goes in any direction except in the direction that leads you as the murderer, in that case the court will also be convicting you. Of course, over the years I've picked up thousands of such other nuances, but at the fear of droning on and on for maybe an hour or two, I will cut this short and maybe pick up on some other occasion. But these were some of the few things that I think everybody should know about as a citizen, hopefully not as a person who is accused of an offense, or as a person who maybe in the future might have to file a complaint against somebody. In any case, these are things that everybody should know about, just so that they understand what the criminal justice system of India works like. Hope you enjoyed this.